What is up, home fries and hash browns? It's a Sunday afternoon. My name is Jerry, and I'm here to give you another first impressions video. It's been a busy weekend at the cinema. Just making up for some lost time or something like that. So, here we go. Me and Ryan, last night, checked out the new Expendables film. Yes, the Expendables 3. The third in a line of nostalgia action motion pictures, spearheaded by none other than Sylvester Stallone. Sly Stallone, for those of you who know him. So this is the third film of the Expendables franchise, and I'm gonna I feel like every time I do one of these reviews, I'm like, I have to level with you guys about something. And today, that thing is that I have not seen the first film. I have not. I wasn't really interested in it, and I didn't get around to seeing it. There was something else that came out, or whatever. I can't remember how long ago this was. So I haven't seen the first film, but I have seen the second film. And from what I've heard, the second film improves on the first, if for no other reason than it's just more fun, a little less overly serious. And I get the sense that that's what these Expendables movies have sort of started to do, is like each time we do this, it gets a little less self-important and a little more humorous, a little more fun, you know, still gritty when they need to be, but, you know, fun. So, I wasn't champing at the bit to see this, but I had a good time with the second movie. I saw it with some friends, we had a few drinks. These were guys who were really into Van Damme and you know, all these guys' old movies. So that's the kind of audience you really want to see this with, is just people who have the nostalgia. So, the Expendables 3. It's roughly the same formula. We're gonna get a bunch of old action stars together, and we're gonna, you know, have them go out on this gritty, violent, you know, mission, you know, this impossible mission that they're gonna have to sort of work together and pull through, and along the way a bunch of people are gonna stop by who you remember and love. And, you know, for the most part, the Expendables 3 does keep this formula alive, but they do take some effort to kind of bridge the gap. There's a lot of ideas in this film, or at least, you know, themes touched upon with regard to getting old, you know, being past your time and past your prime, and, you know, young man's game and all that stuff. Newfangled technology versus, you know, old-fashioned fighting skills and guns and knives and whatnot. And, it's actually kind of interesting with this movie, in a sense. I mean, this movie, I feel like you kind of got to take on two separate levels. Because as a movie, you know, if you're thinking critically, it's kind of a holy mess. It jumps back and forth between this gritty violence and then, you know, these pretty wacky scenes, and then sometimes it's funny because it is intending to be, and then sometimes it's funny just because it's kind of bad. So it's a very mixed experience in terms of at least cinematic quality. I don't know what it is about these movies, because I noticed it with the second one, and I heard it about the first one. It's, even if you have a low budget, which I get the sense this might have, it's not that hard to get a hold of a Red nowadays. Like, independent films with no money can get a Red or an Alexa, or at least a pretty good camera. And these films have such inconsistent cinematography, which just seems strange to me. There are a lot of, like, establishing shots and stuff that look like they were shot on, you know, prosumer grade DSLRs and stuff. So that's sort of a problem that carries over, I feel, from the second movie. I was also surprised because, you know, I mean, the action is a good deal of the point of this movie. The action and these sort of older action movie archetypes are the point of this movie, are what this movie's meat and potatoes are. It's what its nostalgia is for. And I had to wonder partway through, like, what happened to their budget? Was the second one just not that successful? Did they have a smaller budget here? Because there is a lot of CG that's really apparent. You know, there's CG helicopters, a lot of CG explosions. There's even CG water in a pond scene. You know, there's a lot of CG all over this movie that's not all that good CG, that's pretty apparent, and you'd think that for a big franchise action movie, sunlight, for as much money as you'd think Stallone could get, they might be able to afford some better effects, or some practical effects, because, I mean, these movies are harkening back to a time where practical effects were much more widely used. So that was a little strange to me. You know, this film is sort of all over the place. You know, it's like you have this dialogue where some of it is, you know, intentionally cheesy, you know, the sort of one-liners you would get in the kind of movies that this harkens back to, but some of the dialogue is also just kind of flat, just because it's flat. and you can always sort of tell the difference. And what's interesting to me about this movie, too, is that you have so many different people in it whose acting capability and whose approach to their characters is so wildly different. On the one hand, you've got like Mel Gibson, who's giving like a legitimately powerful performance, at least for this kind of thing. And then you've got, Antonio Banderas, who's a really over-the-top character who brings a lot of humor into things. Then you have, Stallone, who's really serious, who does a pretty good job. You've got Kelsey Grammer in there, who brings a certain level of style to his performance. Then you've got Jason Statham, who's just pretty believable. And then you've got these other guys who are sort of a range from stiff to, over the top to all kinds of things. And somehow this all feels like they're in the same movie, even though they're not all acting like they're in the same movie. So that's strange, but neat, I guess. The editing is kind of all over the place. The pace is a little all over the place. And in terms of the action itself is cool a lot of the time. It's just the way they capture it that's just sort of workmanlike. It's not really shot all that remarkably. Like, there are cool set pieces and the stuff that they're doing is cool, but the action itself isn't particularly flashy or particularly nicely captured, which worries me a little bit for the remake of The Raid, because I guess Patrick Hughes, who directed this, is going to direct that. And also, you just have this movie that has a bunch of different kinds of scenes. So sometimes it's being a fun action flick, and sometimes it's really serious, and then sometimes it's over the top with this sort of wacky humor. And for some reason, I guess here's the thing. As a film, The Expendables 3 is not very good. It's not a very good film. If you want to be critical about it, it's not a very good film. There's a lot of technical inconsistency, there's a lot of performance inconsistency, the script certainly leaves a lot to be desired. However, I don't get the sense that this movie necessarily minds all those things, because this movie is an homage to / an attempt to keep alive, the gritty action movies and the heroes who brought those things to life. Those movies were all cheesy, and to an extent, so is this. So, just as a film experience, as inconsistent as it is, as it can be, by the time it was all said and done, as a complete whole, I did have a good time. The times you're supposed to feel for Stallone as this lone wolf and stuff like that, they're effective enough. The action is cool enough. There's a lot of humor, and I guess the humor is sort of the best asset this movie has, in addition to a couple of the performances, one of which is Antonio Banderas, who is a lot of fun to watch. He is clearly having a blast. They kind of let him off the leash to be this really gung-ho, excited, eccentric guy, and I know some people find him annoying, and I can totally see why, but I was all giggles whenever he was on screen. I love him in this movie. And the other person is Mel Gibson. Mel Gibson is the villain in this, and he's fantastic. I mean, every time he's on screen, he elevates the movie. Say what you will about the man as a person, he's a damn fine actor. And I was thinking, the first time they really get a scene with him, and he gets to have, a monologue, that scene, that little interrogation bit is better than the entirety of the movie that came before it. Not to say that the movie that came before that, his scenes wasn't fun, but his scenes, he is legitimately good in this movie, and he brings a certain weight to his performance. He's still a bad guy, but you understand him. So Mel Gibson is definitely a standout in this movie, and I always like Dolph Lundgren in these. I think he's pretty fun the way he plays his character. Kelsey Grammer's really good. Harrison Ford is also in this, and at first when he came on screen I was like, here we go, he reminds me of a grumpy bowl of oatmeal nowadays, but he's even fun in this, and he's, he's having a good time with it, and that's nice to see. I was bummed personally that Terry Crews isn't in this movie a whole lot, because he was one of my very favorite things about Expendables 2, but Jason Statham's good, and they bring in Wesley Snipes, which is a little awkward, just because, the second they bring him in, Terry Crews leaves, and it's like, why can't we have more than one black action hero? But Wesley Snipes is a lot of fun to watch, too. He kind of feels like he's acting in some kind of 70s blaxploitation movie, because he's a bit over the top, and he's got a really eccentric lingo some of the time, and they really play up his you know, machismo and badassery, especially when when we first see him on screen. So this movie does sort of flirt with the line between, like, heightened action and realistic action. And the new guys, the young people that this movie brings in, are actually pretty good. You sort of start out being like, why are we watching these people when the movie is supposed to be about, you know, these older action heroes? But when you get to know them, they're on the level with the movie and they're fun to watch. And then when they're all working together, you know, it's great. It's very enjoyable. So, you know, technically speaking, as a film, yeah, this is not all that good of a movie. It's maybe not worth top dollar at the theater, but if this is your jam, if you can get down with, you know, nostalgia and, you know, action heroes and stuff like that, and, you know, beefy action scenes, this movie's probably for you. You know, it's not great, but you'll probably have a good time, and I get the sense that's what these movies are most concerned about, and for that, they are successful, at least for me. The last thing I'll say is a lot of people are freaking out about this being PG-13. They want to, I guess, bring in the younger crowds and stuff like that. There's, you know, the movie seems to wear that, if not on its sleeve, at least somewhere on its jacket. And the PG-13 doesn't really hurt. In fact, I found the PG-13 rating kind of disturbing for this, because even though there's no blood, I'm sure that's how they got away with it, the action is still really gritty, and still very violent, and still shot in such a way that it feels violent. So I feel like this could have been an R-rated movie. It's just the absence of blood makes it not so, and that freaks me out a little bit, just because, you know, if we're gonna have a rating system, I couldn't help but wonder partway through this movie, like, okay, who paid for this movie to be PG-13? Because it's clearly more violent than most PG-13 movies ought to be. But anyhow, I digress. So that's it for now. I gotta imagine they're gonna do another one of these, unless they don't make a whole lot of money. So who would you like to see? You want them to add more young people to this and sort of bridge that gap? Are there heroes you'd like to see more? Or is there something, you know, sort of different or more eccentric you'd like to see them do with the plot? Because that's another thing I sort of thought of, was like, if they could really commit to just really having fun with these, they could do a lot of wacky shit. I don't know if they would be into that, but, you know, they could bend these in certain, you know, science fiction-y ways. But yeah, so that's it for now. Expendables 3 is the film. I am Jerry. Cheers.